They told him the war was over, but Dawood knew better. Peace was never a ceremony or a paper signed under flags. It was a lie politicians whispered into microphones to quiet the restless, while the real war continued inside the bones of the men they sent to fight. He had survived 5 deployments and 2 bullets, the last of which tore through his shoulder during a nighttime raid that no longer had a name. When he was discharged, they gave him a duffel bag, a final salute, and an envelope of cash that wouldn't cover a month's rent. The uniform, stiff and faded, felt like a costume once he took it off. All power drained from its seams the moment he stepped outside the perimeter. He came home to Aleppo and found the neighborhood he grew up and flattened. The olive tree his father once used as a landmark to explain directions had been turned to ash. His mother had died while he was away, a heart attack in the heat. No electricity, no way to call for help. His younger brother, Kareem, had vanished during a protest crackdown, and no one knew whether he'd ended up in a prison or beneath the soil. Home was not a home anymore. It was a graveyard without names, a city of ghosts that wore dust instead of faces. Dawood left after 3 days. The memories were too loud and the silence too complete. He headed north, hitching rides with strangers, sleeping in mosques and construction sites, following the stream of men whose faces carried the same blank exhaustion. He drifted through Beirut, then Mersin, eventually arriving in Gaziantep, where refugee camps bled into the city outskirts like spilled ink. There, he found work that didn't require a name, digging trenches, laying bricks, unloading trucks at sunrise for wages that disappeared by nightfall. His body was strong, but his mind had begun to unravel, not from trauma that was already sewn into him like a second skin, but from futility. No matter how many days he worked, he was no closer to building a life. He had no papers, no bank account, no government, no future, just a memory of control, of precision, of holding a rifle steady while chaos exploded around him. That was his only mastery. Then one night, as he lay curled beneath a rusted scaffolding wrapped in a fraying thermal blanket, he saw a young boy nearby, barely 19, his face lit by the bluish glow of a smartphone. The boy's thumbs moved fast, eyes scanning something with intent. Not messages, not games, something more calculated. Dawood asked, his voice hoarse from cement dust. "What are you doing?" The boy, without looking up, said, "Trading." Dawood asked what that meant. The boy tilted the screen just enough to show a flurry of red and green lines on a black chart. "Forex. I flip currencies. Small moves, big money." Dawood didn't understand, but the words clung to him like smoke. Big money. From a phone. That night, he couldn't sleep. Not because he was cold. He had stopped feeling the cold weeks ago, but because for the first time since the war, he felt curiosity. Not survival, not rage. Curiosity. That tiny spark, almost forgotten, whispered a question that wouldn't leave him alone. What if he could master this? What if there was a skill, not in destruction, but in calculation, that could bring back the dignity the war had stolen? The next day, he searched the trash behind an electronics repair stall until he found an old Android phone with a cracked screen and no SIM card. He took it to a local fixer who, for the price of a sandwich and some cigarettes, got it charging again. Dawood didn't know where to start, so he searched Forex on a borrowed Wi-Fi signal at a coffee shop. It was overwhelming. Acronyms, indicators, strategies with names that sounded like military operations. But he didn't flinch. He had studied battle maps. He had waited 3 hours for a single movement through a rifle scope. He would figure this out. What he didn't have in money, he made up for in patience. He spent the next 3 weeks sleeping during the day and studying charts at night. He didn't care about the news or the hype. He just watched price move. He noticed how it bounced from certain levels, how candles formed patterns, how the market faked left before cutting right. It reminded him of combat, of the way an enemy exposed a shoulder just before firing, of how silence was often a louder signal than gunfire. He began drawing imaginary lines on paper, mimicking support and resistance zones, tracking price the way he used to track targets. He didn't know the jargon yet. He just knew the rhythm. He could feel it. One night, after watching Euro to US dollar stall at the same level for the 3rd time in 5 hours, he whispered to himself, "It's going to fall." He wasn't guessing. He just knew. He had seen that pattern in the streets of Raqqa, when enemy forces would feign a push only to retreat and flank. The market was no different. Deception was part of the game. He signed up for a demo account. The platform looked like a war room to him. Candles, zones, red lines for stops, green lines for profit. It all made sense. He didn't place a single trade for the first 5 days. He just watched, took notes, measured. He treated it like reconnaissance. When he finally placed his first demo trade, a sell on US dollar to Japanese yen, his hands didn't shake. His heart didn't race. This was familiar. This was control. The trade closed in profit. Not much, just $7. But it wasn't the money. It was the feeling. After years of being hunted, displaced, unwanted, here was something he could command with nothing but his eyes and his discipline. No papers, no bullets, just skill. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He wrote down the entry, exit, stop, and pattern in a notebook he used to track bullet counts during combat. Every trade after that was logged with the same care. He didn't trade more than once a night. He wanted perfection, not profit. Within a month, he had flipped the demo from $1,000 to $1,138. Clean. No spikes. No wild drawdowns. The pattern was clear. He was built for this. And though he was still sleeping in borrowed spaces, eating from shared plates, and carrying the ghosts of a war no one spoke about anymore, inside the charts, inside those pulsing lines of red and green, he was no longer a broken soldier. He was a man learning how to fight a new kind of war, with no gun, no orders, just candlesticks. There is a moment in every soldier's life when the bullets are no longer metal, when every move, every breath, every hesitation could cost more than flesh. Dawood knew this feeling too well. He had traded in war zones before, not currencies, but time, position, silence. He had once held a trigger for 9 hours without pulling it, waiting for just the right wind, the right shadow, the exact mistake from the man across the way. In war, that kind of discipline saved lives. In trading, he would learn, it saved accounts. It was 6 weeks since he had discovered Forex. His nights were now quiet marathons of price movement and silent thinking. By day, he still carried concrete, his shoulders stiff from old injuries and his palms hardened like dry leather. But at night, he entered the battlefield of charts, not with adrenaline, but with something stranger, a cautious kind of hope. His demo account had grown slowly. He never chased profit, never risked too much. He had read somewhere, scribbled on a Telegram screenshot in a refugee forum, risk only 1% per trade, and he obeyed like it was military doctrine. And yet, despite all this preparation, he still hadn't placed a single real trade. Because placing a real trade required more than strategy, it required trust. Not in the system, not in the broker, in himself. He had $23 in cash. It had taken him 10 days to save that from hauling bricks, after paying for bread and water and SIM card data. And it was exactly what the online exchanger in the bazaar had quoted for a prepaid virtual Visa card. The man who sold the card didn't ask questions. He just handed Dawood the plastic rectangle with a barcode on the back and said, "Don't mess it up." Dawood didn't flinch. He walked straight to a cafe where he knew the Wi-Fi didn't cut out during peak hours and opened a broker account under an alias. It wasn't exactly legal, but legality was a privilege for people with governments. He wasn't one of them. He was stateless, paperless, but not powerless. He entered his details, uploaded a blurry selfie, typed the long Visa card code into the deposit page, waited. The screen froze. For a moment, his heart stopped. Then, confirmed. The number appeared in the corner of the terminal window, $20 after conversion fees. It was a laughable amount. It wouldn't buy a shirt in Istanbul. But to Dawood, it was more real than anything he'd held in years. It was his, earned by his hands, and now put at risk by his choices. He opened euro to US dollar. It had been ranging all afternoon. He waited, checked the 15-minute chart. A clear support zone. 2 taps. Third approaching. Price was consolidating beneath a resistance line like a coiled spring. He breathed through his nose, slowly. He remembered the way a room feels just before the shooting starts. Too still, too calm. This felt the same. But this time, the only weapon was his decision. He waited for the candle to break, then close above. Then he clicked, buy. He risked exactly $1. His stop loss was tight, his take profit modest. He stared. The candle moved. Up, down, up again. His pulse raced. Not because of greed, Not because of fear, because of weight. This was real. This was his blood on the line now, not theory, not practice. The price pushed past the entry, wobbled, then sprinted upward in a flash of green. The target hit, plus $1.80. He didn't cheer, didn't gasp. He leaned back in the plastic chair, closed his eyes, and let the noise of the cafe fade behind him. He had placed his first live trade. He had made more than he earned in 2 hours carrying bricks. Not because of luck, but because he had learned to wait, to observe, to trust. He went home that night without saying a word to anyone. He sat in the dark corner of the dormitory shelter and opened his notebook. He wrote, Trade number 1, Euro to US dollar, buy. Breakout above resistance. Entry 1.0930. TP 1.0950. SL 1.0915. Result plus $1.80. Notes, patience, precision, no emotion. Real blood now. He stared at those last words for a long time. Real blood, because that's what it was. He didn't have a salary. He didn't have a fallback. Every cent he risked came from his back, his time, his aching knees. It meant that mistakes couldn't be called lessons unless they were survived. And yet, he felt stronger than he had in years. Not because of the money, but because he had made a decision and executed it on his own terms. He slept better that night than he had since his unit was disbanded. Not because he was rich, but because he wasn't powerless anymore. And when the morning came and the cold crept in again through the cracks in the tin wall, Dawood rose not as a laborer, not as a refugee, not even as a soldier. He rose as a trader, still poor, still paperless, but no longer invisible, no longer defeated, just beginning. Victory, for a soldier, is a dangerous drug. It doesn't hit all at once. It seeps in, quiet, like pride, like a breeze that turns into a sandstorm before you realize you should have shut the door. Dawood didn't realize he had let his guard down. Not at first. The night after his first live profit, he walked with a new kind of posture. Not arrogance, but a quiet confidence that hadn't lived in him for years. He still showed up at the construction site at 6 a.m., still mixed cement with aching shoulders, still carried bricks past men who didn't know his name. But in his mind, something had changed. He had taken a step into another world, a place where his ideas, not just his labor, could make money, real money. In the evenings, he returned to his tiny cot at the shelter with urgency. He didn't even eat until he checked his charts. His first few live trades went well. Small gains. Nothing crazy. He followed the same strict rules that kept him alive in war. Don't fire unless you're certain. Don't chase. Don't react to noise. But with every trade that closed in profit, $2.10 here, $1.76 there, something else crept in. A voice. Not loud. Not commanding. Just a whisper. What if you made it bigger? He ignored it for days. Then one night, a candle shot through resistance like a rocket on the pound sterling to US dollar chart. It moved so fast, Dawood felt like his screen was glitching. He had watched that zone build up for over a week, and now the breakout was here. A clean setup. A textbook move. He had only $27 left in his account after days of slow wins and a few minor losses. If he played this right, he could double it. Maybe even hit $50. That number felt mythical to him. It wasn't greed, he told himself. It was strategy. The sniper in him was watching the angle. The wind was still. The target exposed. So he doubled the lot size. Then placed the trade. Buy. He stared. Price climbed. 1 pip. Then another. Then a stall. He held. No emotion. Just control. Then, in seconds, the market turned. A red candle sliced down like a blade. Then another. And another. Dawood sat up straight. Clicked to close. Slippage. Delayed response. By the time the trade exited, $19 was gone. He didn't move. He sat in the hard plastic chair, his knees locked, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the line where his account balance now read $7.83. It felt like being ambushed. He hadn't broken his rules, not exactly. The setup was real. The breakout had just been a fake, a market trick, a head fake, but he had broken something else, something harder to name. Judgment, discipline, the sense that he was in control. And then, because shame is a heavy thing, he did what thousands of traders have done before him. He tried to win it back. He re-entered. A small trade. Quick scalp. Sell US dollar to Swiss franc. Price was stalling. The candle moved against him. He didn't close. He watched. It hit stop loss. Now, $5.90. He took another. Lost. $4.35. Another. Lost. $2.70. By the time he finally stopped, his balance was 84 cents. Not enough to open another position. Not even enough to withdraw. He stared at it like it had betrayed him. But the truth was far uglier. He hadn't been shot. He had stood up from cover. And the market, as ruthless as any battlefield, had fired back. He walked outside the cafe. The night air was sharp. His fingers trembled. Not from cold, from realization. The same kind of sick, hollow feeling he remembered from the day he lost his squad. A moment when your brain races to find someone to blame, only to land, finally and unforgivingly, on yourself. He sat down on a curb, pulled out the old bullet journal he used as a trade log, and stared at the last few entries. He flipped to a fresh page and wrote, "Account wiped. Trade number 12, broke rules. Increased size. No stop adjustment. Emotion-led. Lesson, never assume you've won. The market is not your friend. It is not your enemy. It is a sniper, just like I was." He closed the book and pressed it to his forehead. Not a prayer, a ritual, a promise. He had no more money, no more trades, but he was not going to quit. He had been knocked down before, in deserts, in alleys, in corridors of hospitals where no one wore rank. But the one thing the army had carved into him, deeper than tactics, deeper than pride, was this. You don't die just because you're down. You get back up, you learn, and next time, you move slower, cleaner, with purpose. Tomorrow, he would return to the job site, stack bricks until his fingers cracked, save every lira, and in 2 weeks, maybe 3, he'd have enough to try again. Not to gamble, to build, not to prove anything, but to survive. Better. Recovery isn't glamorous. It isn't set to music. There is no montage, no sudden clarity. It is slow, gritty, a daily negotiation between shame and persistence. For Dawood, the days that followed the account wipe felt heavier than anything he'd carried on the battlefield. The concrete sacks on the job site didn't hurt his back the way regret hurt his chest. Every swing of the shovel reminded him that he had traded not just money, but dignity, for a flicker of pride. The kind of pride that cost you everything in combat. The kind that made you break formation. The kind that got your brothers killed. Still, he showed up. Before dawn. After dark. Quiet. Focused. Not because he was resilient, but because he had nothing else. The market had taken his $20, but it had also revealed something. That this game of structure, psychology, risk, wasn't a hustle. It was an environment, a mental battlefield, and he'd lost his first real engagement. That didn't mean he would leave the war. He spent nights re-watching the same chart patterns on free Wi-Fi in a broken-down internet cafe 2 blocks from the job site. He couldn't place trades, but he could watch, could sketch, could study how price moved when news hit, how volume expanded on breakouts, how long wicks hinted at hidden hands. He wrote it all in his notebook, labeled everything with sniper metaphors. Reversals were ambushes, fakeouts were decoys, stop hunts were booby traps. It made sense that way. It gave him language, structure, a way to recover control. And then, one cold evening, he noticed the man. The cafe was nearly empty. Only 3 computers worked, and most of the men who came used them to talk to family or apply for jobs. But in the back corner, every night at the same hour, sat an older man with thick hands and a patched wool coat. His laptop was ancient, the plastic yellowed, the hinges taped, but the screen always showed one thing: trading platforms. Charts. MT4. Sometimes he mumbled to himself in Arabic. Once, Dawood passed by and heard him say, "This level is where they always get greedy." Dawood waited 3 days before speaking to him. On the 4th night, he approached with quiet deference and asked, "Sir, are you a trader?" The man didn't look up right away. He moved a moving average with his mouse, then said, "What's your drawdown?" Dawood blinked. "Excuse me." The man turned his head. His eyes were the kind that had seen wars, maybe a different one, maybe the same, and his face wore the exhaustion of someone who no longer cared about appearances. "If you don't know your drawdown, you're not a trader yet," he said. Dawood sat. They didn't exchange names. But that night began a new chapter. The man, who referred to himself only as Uncle, had once been a chemical engineer in Mosul. He had traded on the side during the oil boom and lost everything when ISIS took the city. Now he lived above a barber shop, rented out charts for $1 an hour, and traded a $500 account passed down from a friend in Sweden. He didn't teach. He quizzed. He challenged. He ridiculed. But most of all, he forced Dawood to think. Why did you enter here? What were you hoping the market would do? Where's the pain in this structure? He would point at candles and ask Dawood to describe what the participants were feeling, not the strategy, but the emotion behind the move. This spike wasn't technical. It was fear. The breakout was just the story the market told so the big players could sell into retail euphoria. He had no fancy tools, no paid indicators. He used naked charts and a few moving averages. Everything you need, he said, is in the reaction. Under Uncle's guidance, Dawood started to rebuild not just his strategy, but his mindset. He stopped looking for magic setups. He started noticing behavior. He learned the rhythm of London Open, the traps of New York reversal, the empty volume of Friday evenings. He learned to journal before he even entered a trade, to write down his expectation, his emotional state, the reason he wasn't doing nothing instead. Discipline, Uncle told him, isn't just waiting. It's knowing why you wait. Within a month, Dawood had saved another $25. He deposited it into a fresh account, this time with a different broker, one recommended by Uncle. He didn't trade for the first 5 days. He watched, logged, measured. When he finally placed a trade, a sell on pound sterling to Japanese yen at an exhaustion wick, he used the smallest lot size possible, took profit at 1:1, closed it manually before his target hit, because the order flow looked unnatural. It was a $1.12 gain. He and Uncle reviewed it for 20 minutes, not because of the profit, but because the decision-making was clean. This, Uncle said, tapping the screen, was a trade made by someone who's been humbled. Dawood didn't reply. He didn't need to. That night, he walked home through the mist with something heavier than pride, lighter than joy. It was clarity. The understanding that his trauma wasn't a handicap. It was an edge. He had stared down death. Now, he was learning to stare down greed. And that made him dangerous, not to others, but to the market itself. Success is a quieter feeling than people expect. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or celebration, especially not in the cold alleyways of a city where no one knows your name. For Dawood, his first streak of profitable trades didn't feel like winning. It felt like something else entirely, like alignment. The kind of deep mental click you get when your training meets your instincts, when your preparation wraps perfectly around the chaos of reality. He didn't brag. He didn't even smile. But his journal pages were filling up with green numbers, and his voice, the one inside his head that had once shouted blame, had begun to whisper calm. 5 trades, 5 clean executions, no rush, no over-leverage, all of them logged with surgeon-like clarity. He had traded only once per day, waiting hours for setups, walking away from anything that looked uncertain. His rules had become sacred, and for each trade, Uncle had sat beside him like a grizzled ghost, nodding silently at his restraint, not praising the profits. That was never the point, but marking the growth of a mind no longer ruled by panic or pride. "You're ready," Uncle said one night, breaking the silence without looking up from his screen. Dawood paused, mid-entry into his journal. "For what?" Uncle reached into the inside pocket of his tattered coat and pulled out a folded flyer, creased, slightly yellowed, in English and Arabic. It advertised something Dawood had only heard whispers about in Telegram groups and stray YouTube comments: a prop trading evaluation program. The words "no upfront fee" were circled in blue pen. It was sponsored by a European NGO partnering with a small proprietary trading firm. Their mission was bold: fund 100 refugee traders across the Middle East and North Africa. Give them capital. Watch what they do with it. The test is in 2 weeks, Uncle said. Simulated account. Real risk parameters. They want consistency, not miracles. Dawood stared at the paper as if it were an artifact. A chance. A window. "But I don't have documents," he said. "No passport. No bank." "They don't care," Uncle replied. "It's crypto payout. They want results." That's it. The idea rattled something inside Dawood. It wasn't just about funding. It was about legitimacy. Until now, every trade he placed felt like a private rebellion. An invisible war waged in silence. But this was different. This was a chance to be seen, to prove, not to the market, not to the shelter men or construction bosses, but to himself, that he wasn't just surviving. He was becoming. He trained like a soldier, not with brute effort, but with surgical intensity. Every day for the next 10 days, he traded in simulation under tighter rules than the program even required. Maximum drawdown, 3%. Risk per trade, 0.5%. Break-even point, 8% over 20 trades. No second entries, no overnight holds. He practiced execution in slow conditions. He backtested setups he'd seen hundreds of times, but never traded. He mapped reaction zones by hand, drew structure breaks with colored pens, and began labeling every trade with what he felt as much as what he saw. He stopped chasing green candles. He started hunting confirmation. On the 11th night, Uncle sat down beside him as Dawood stared at the Euro chart, blinking hard under the glare of the screen. "You're trading like a man who doesn't need to win," Uncle said. "I'm trading like a man who can't afford to lose," Dawood corrected. Uncle let out a rare, quiet laugh, the kind that sounds like it hurts coming out. "That's the same thing," he said. The day of the prop evaluation arrived, without ceremony. Dawood entered his login into the proprietary firm's simulator. The account showed $10,000 virtual capital. The dashboard ticked with quiet intensity. He took a deep breath, exhaled slowly through his nose, and waited. No trade on day 1. None on day 2. On day 3, he spotted a textbook reversal on gold. Price was rejecting a weekly key level with precision. He entered with a 0.5% risk and a 1:2 reward. Trade closed in profit. He didn't flinch. Over the next 10 days, he placed only 7 trades. 5 won, 2 scratched, 0 losses beyond his stop. He didn't swing for home runs. He focused on survival, on professionalism, on letting the trades come to him. When he hit 6% growth with less than 1% drawdown, he stopped, submitted the report, and waited. The email came 2 days later. Short, simple. "Congratulations. Welcome to the firm. Your funded account, $25,000. First payout in 30 days if risk discipline remains intact. Performance monitor begins now." He didn't jump, didn't cry. He went to the shelter's prayer room, knelt, and stayed there for a long time, forehead pressed to the mat, breathing in silence. He had no papers, no home, no official nationality. But now, he had something no border could take from him. Proof, not of worth, but of capacity, of discipline sharpened in war, of intellect refined in struggle. He wasn't just trading anymore. He was building something permanent, out of nothing but structure, silence, and steel. There is a peculiar pressure that comes with responsibility, not for your own survival, but for someone else's trust. Dawood had felt it once before, years ago, when he led a squad into enemy territory under radio silence. Every step, every breath, every flick of his finger felt like it carried the weight of his men's lives. That same pressure returned now, in a different form, as he stared at the top corner of his screen where the number $25,000 glowed. It wasn't his money, not truly, but it might as well have been a live round resting against his palm. This was no longer a simulation. Every trade he placed was now monitored. Every deviation from the rules could mean disqualification. If his drawdown exceeded 5%, he would lose the account. If he traded recklessly, the prop firm would cut him off. He had earned this capital not by charm or charisma, but through discipline, through precise execution and emotional mastery. And now, he had to do it again, this time with the market watching. He set his new rules like armor. No more than 2 trades per day, no trades during high-impact news events unless fully prepared, maximum 1% risk, and, most critically, no deviation from his tested system, no matter how enticing a setup appeared. The first week passed quietly. Dawood traded with surgical care. A scalp on euro to US dollar after a false breakout netted $312. A swing on pound sterling to Japanese yen, held for 2 days, brought in $475. He took a small loss on a US dollar to Canadian dollar fakeout, only $103, and logged every reason for entry and exit in meticulous handwriting. By the end of week 1, the account was up 2.4%. More than enough. Safe, clean, professional. But in the quiet came temptation. The the kind that doesn't shout. It whispers. On a Tuesday evening, just before the London close, he spotted it. Gold, XAU/USD, was coiling tightly beneath a resistance zone that had held for weeks. The volume was rising. Price was squeezing into a narrow channel. And in his gut, he felt that now familiar tension, like before a sniper pull. The breakout was coming. And if it broke through, there was clean air for at least 300 pips. He analyzed it, checked his rules. According to his system, the signal wasn't clean enough yet. There hadn't been a proper retest. Momentum was premature, but his intuition, honed from hundreds of hours in front of candles, screamed that this was the move. The kind that makes monthly payouts in a single stroke. He hovered over the buy button. It was a break of rules entry. Risky, but the potential reward was massive. He thought of the construction site, the dust in his lungs, the cracked boots. He thought of the $700 he had already made that week, the most he'd ever earned in his life, and how another $1,000 could mean a private room, a decent laptop, or even a ticket to Istanbul. His finger twitched. Then he heard it, not in sound, but in memory. Uncle's voice. "You're not here to win. You're here to stay." Dawood closed the chart, logged the temptation in his journal. No trade taken. Instead, he opened a chart on euro to Swiss franc and watched a tight consolidation around a support zone. 40 minutes later, a clean engulfing candle printed on the 15-minute time frame. Entry signal confirmed. He placed a sell order. Low risk. Target modest. Trade closed in profit. Plus $192. He didn't feel triumph. He felt clarity. Because the real enemy wasn't the chart. It was urgency. That whisper in the mind that says, now or never. The same voice that gets traders wiped out after months of progress. He walked home that night in the cold, his hands deep in his coat, and felt the tension in his shoulders melt away. He had passed a test far greater than any evaluation. He had ignored the golden apple. He had refused the sniper shot that wasn't his. And that, more than any win, made him a professional. By the end of the month, Dawood had brought the $25,000 account up by 9.3%. The firm sent him a congratulatory email. His first payout, $1,162.50, hit his crypto wallet the following Monday. It wasn't a dream. It was his new reality. Not luck, not charity, but skill, sharpened like steel. It happened in seconds. No warning, no sound. Just an email notification at 2:17 a.m. while Dawood was charting the London pre-open. New login to your Telegram account from a Windows device in Moscow. At first, he thought it was spam, some phishing scam. But when he reached for his phone to open Telegram, he was already logged out. Access denied. His stomach turned cold. He tried the web version. Nothing. Attempted recovery. The code never came. His registered number, a burner SIM card bought from a dusty stall in Gaziantep, now showed no service. He wasn't just locked out. He had been erased. Panic rose in him, not like a sudden spike, but like a slow, cruel flood. Telegram was more than just chat. It was his entire communication line to the prop firm, his funded account manager, the contact group where payouts were scheduled, the verification portal, everything gone. Dawood stood in the dim light of the cafe corner, the only sound a flickering fluorescent above his head. For a full minute, he didn't move, just stared at his reflection in the dark screen. The last month had been the most orderly, most disciplined stretch of his life. He had taken trades with mechanical precision, logged every tick, obeyed every rule. But this was chaos from outside the chart, and it hit harder than any stop loss. He walked into the freezing street, the phone in his hand like dead weight. His breath fogged in the air. No SIM, no ID, no recovery email, just a thin thread of memory and a sinking feeling in his gut. For the first time in a long while, Dawood didn't know what to do. But then, he remembered war. The worst battles he'd fought weren't under gunfire. They were after, in the dead silence, when plans collapsed. And in those moments, he had learned something vital. Panic is just the first lie. The truth is what you do after. He walked to the old cafe where Uncle usually traded. It was nearly empty. He found the man hunched over his chart, coffee untouched, watching a USD/Tri-Wick fake a breakout. "I've been locked out," Dawood said. No greeting, no drama. Uncle looked up. "Telegram." He nodded. Uncle nodded once, reached into his coat, and pulled out a tattered notebook. Inside was a list, names, wallet addresses, and 2 backup email domains. "I told you," Uncle said calmly. "The market isn't your only battlefield. The internet is a jungle with no rules. You didn't believe me. I do now." Together, they spent 2 hours drafting a new email, a new Telegram ID. Uncle guided him through contacting the prop firm's security portal, not via Telegram, but through a buried contact form on their website. They wrote in cold, professional English, attached screenshots of his payout logs, his trade history, even a few photos of handwritten notes that matched the trades in the platform. 3 days passed. Then the reply came. "Account frozen pending security confirmation. Verification required via unique trade record." They were asking for something only Dawood could provide: proof of authorship. They sent him 5 closed trades from the last 2 weeks and asked, "Explain the reasoning behind each one. Entry, exit, context, emotion." He smiled. They had no idea they were speaking to a man who treated his trading journal like a battle report. He spent 4 hours writing the reply. Not just charts, but notes. Every candle justified. Every exit rationalized. He explained why he had cut the gold short early due to volume divergence. Why he had held the euro to Japanese yen swing through Friday, close despite swap fees. He cited moving average structure, Fibonacci retracement levels, price action context, even behavioral cues. 2 days later, the prop firm replied, "Account restored. All funds intact. New credentials below. Welcome back, Trader Dawood." He didn't cheer. He didn't laugh. He just exhaled. For the second time in 2 months, he had stood at the edge of erasure and refused to fall. He logged into his terminal. Balance, $27,891.43. All there. He looked up from the screen, eyes dry but burning with something deeper than relief. Resolve. Because now, he understood something even Uncle had never said out loud. In trading, the biggest threat isn't price movement. It's distraction, emotion, disruption from beyond the chart. And he had just passed his first true non-market test. No candles involved. No indicators. Just presence of mind. And a refusal to panic. The first time Dawood unlocked the rusted metal door to his new room, it made a sound like the past being peeled open. The room was nothing grand. Just 12 square meters, whitewashed walls, a rickety fan spinning from a low ceiling. But it was his. No more cold tin shelters. No more sleeping next to strangers in rows of creaky bunk beds. This was privacy, control, silence. He dropped his backpack on the floor and stood there for a long moment, just listening to the sound of stillness. His first payout had changed everything. Not overnight, not in a movie scene explosion of riches, but in the smallest, most profound ways. He'd spent $400 on 3 months rent up front. Another $300 on a used Lenovo laptop with a cracked hinge but a clean processor. For the first time in his adult life, he had a machine that was his, not borrowed, not rented by the hour in a cafe. He ran his first chart on it while sitting cross-legged on the tile floor, the laptop resting on a crate turned sideways. And when the MT4 terminal opened, glowing quietly in the dark, it felt like he was stepping into a cockpit. Trading, once an act of desperation, had now become something else. A routine, a profession. He still wore the same 2 sets of clothes, still ate the same flatbread and lentil stew, but now he lived above the noise. Literally. His new room was on the 2nd floor of a crumbling building in a narrow alley where light barely reached the windows. But for Dawood, it was altitude. He could think here. He woke every day before the London Open, brewed instant coffee with water heated on a portable gas burner, and ran through his watch list. He'd built a simple dashboard for pairs, 3 time frames, daily narrative updates. His setups had become second nature. He didn't chase profits anymore. He stalked clarity. And yet, with comfort came distance. He started noticing things. The other men at the job site no longer spoke to him the same way. Some asked questions, vague, probing ones, about money, about crypto, about the kind of lucky break he'd gotten. He answered politely, but vaguely. Others simply pulled away, laughed less, shared fewer cigarettes. One night, he walked past the old cafe where Uncle used to sit and found someone else in his chair. When he asked about him, the owner shrugged. Gone. Left last week. No message. He tried to call the burner number Uncle had given him months ago. disconnected. He waited outside the cafe for 3 nights. Nothing, just silence. Trading had elevated him, but it had also isolated him. Not because he wanted to be alone, but because success, especially the kind that isn't loud, that comes in increments, built from discipline and failure, creates a quiet chasm between those who endure and those who just survive. One evening, Dawood made a mistake. A small one, technically. He entered a euro to US dollar buy on a minor breakout during New York overlap. The setup was marginal. His rules said pass. But he was bored, restless, craving some kind of movement. The trade hit stop loss in less than 20 minutes. He lost $250. Not a huge sum, but it stung. Not financially. Philosophically, he had betrayed his own system. And for what? A flicker of excitement? He sat back and looked around the room. At the crate desk, the flickering fan, the single mattress against the wall. He realized that the real challenge had begun not when he had nothing, but now, when he had something to protect. Comfort was a new kind of danger. It whispered to the part of him that had grown used to scarcity, tempting him with impatience, laziness, and indulgence. That night, he rewrote his trading rules by hand. At the top, he added a new one. Your comfort zone is a kill zone. Never trade from ease. Trade from clarity. He printed the phrase on a piece of paper and taped it above the crate where he kept his laptop. It wasn't just a reminder. It was a shield. In the days that followed, he returned to form. Smaller trades, tighter stops, more waiting. He even took a 3-day pause when the market grew erratic after a surprise interest rate announcement. Old Dawood would have chased the volatility. New Dawood journaled through it instead. But the loneliness lingered. And one night, unable to sleep, he opened his email and wrote to contact@proprefugee.org. Subject, request for trader community. Hello, my name is Dawood. I passed your evaluation and currently manage a $25,000 account. I would like to ask if there is a way to connect with other funded traders like myself. Not for signals, not for advice, just for company, for perspective, for truth. Trading can be very silent, and sometimes silence is heavy. Thank you, D. He hit send, didn't expect a reply, but it made him feel less invisible. And for now, that was enough. Because even in solitude, even in silence, he wasn't lost. He had his room, his screen, his mind, and a mission still unfolding. It started with a ping. Just another email in his inbox, buried among broker updates and weekly newsletters he rarely read. But the subject line stopped him cold. Interview invitation, rise of the refugee traders. The sender was a woman named Sophia, a financial journalist from a growing YouTube channel that specialized in underdog stories and alternative economies. She claimed to have spoken with someone at the prop firm. She'd heard about Dawood's performance. Quiet, consistent, exceptional. She said she wanted to feature him in an upcoming docuseries about non-traditional traders, those breaking through borders, both literal and economic. At first, Dawood thought it was a scam, but the details were too specific. She referenced trade data only the firm would have known, mentioned the loss he'd taken on euro to US dollar, even noted the pause he'd made during the central bank volatility, praising it as a sign of maturity. This wasn't a mass email. It was tailored and real. She offered 3 options: a written Q&A, a Zoom interview with voice only, or, if he was willing, a full video call where his face and name would be shown to a global audience. There was no money involved, no sponsorship, just recognition, visibility. Dawood closed his laptop and stared at the wall for nearly an hour. He knew what this meant. He knew exactly what kind of risk visibility invited. He had no passport, no legal identity. He was a stateless man living in a gray zone of refugee status, trading on a funded account through backdoor protocols and cryptocurrency. He wasn't doing anything illegal, but legality in his world was fluid, fragile. Visibility meant exposure. Exposure could mean questions. Questions could mean investigations. And all of that could mean an end to the account, to the payouts, to the delicate balance he had managed to build with thread and bone. But then he thought about something else. He thought about them. The boys at the shelter who watched YouTube on borrowed phones, dreaming of something more. The men on construction sites who had given up long before they realized they had. The child he saw once outside a Turkish bakery, drawing candlesticks with chalk on the sidewalk. What if they saw him? What if someone heard his voice and thought, if he can do it, maybe I can too? That night, he replied to Sophia. He agreed to the written Q&A. No voice, no face, no name, just truth. She sent over the questions a day later. They were simple, but deep. Why did you start trading? He wrote, because war taught me that survival depends on anticipation. The market is the same, but here, I can choose the battlefield. What was your lowest point? The day I had 84 cents in my account and still opened a chart. Not a trade, just to remind myself the story wasn't over. What's your biggest win? Not a trade, a mindset. Realizing that I could lose everything and still return sharper. What would you say to others in your position? The market doesn't care who you are, but your discipline will. Build that first. Profit comes later. He sent the answers. Sophia thanked him, said it would be featured in next month's episode. He wouldn't be credited. No links, no promotion, just Trader D, origin undisclosed. And for now, that was perfect. Because Dawood didn't need fame. He needed momentum, the quiet, sacred kind that comes when you keep your head down and let the world whisper about your rise instead of shouting at yourself. 2 weeks later, the video dropped. It went viral, not because of Dawood, but because of the idea that somewhere in the shadows of failed states and abandoned cities, men and women were learning to trade, not for greed, but for freedom. He watched the comments quietly. One of them read, I don't care what anyone says, Trader D is real, and he's out there. Probably watching this. Respect, brother. Dawood didn't reply. He just closed his laptop, stood up, brewed a coffee, and opened the chart. Because recognition is temporary. But growth? That's daily. He didn't see it coming. The email arrived on a quiet Sunday afternoon, just as he finished logging a break-even trade on US dollar to Swiss franc. He hadn't expected anything special, certainly not a message from the head of risk at the proprietary firm. Subject, evaluation complete. Upgrade to $100,000 funded account. Dawood blinked twice, reread the lines. They were simple, direct, congratulating him for 3 months of consistent profitability, minimal drawdown, and mature execution. They cited his discipline, his psychological edge, and his meticulous journaling habits. Then came the offer, a $100,000 funded account. But it came with a condition, not a trade condition, a location condition. Due to expanding regulatory scrutiny, our risk compliance team now requires high-level funded traders to operate from verifiable jurisdictions. To issue your new funded login and release payout permissions, we kindly request you relocate to one of the following eligible countries: Georgia, Albania, or the UAE. Details attached. The breath caught in his chest. It wasn't a punishment. It was an invitation. But it might as well have been an ultimatum. To take the leap, Dawood would have to leave, not just the city, but the fragile security he'd stitched together through anonymity. He had a room now, a rhythm, a quiet life where no one asked too many questions, a balance that let him study and grow without risking the bureaucratic teeth of governments or the xenophobic flare-ups that sometimes lit up the alleyways. But this was $100,000, a six-figure account, the kind of capital that could fund a future, build something permanent, trade full-time, teach, provide. And yet, who was he if he disappeared again? If he packed up and vanished in the night, just like Uncle? What was left behind? He sat with the decision for 3 days. Didn't trade, didn't journal, just thought. He imagined the risks, border crossings, paperwork, interrogations, visa requirements, stateless status flaring up in red at checkpoints. He thought of the long bus rides through unknown towns, sleeping upright in terminals under fluorescent lights. He'd done it before. Could he do it again? Was he still that man? On the 4th morning, he visited the bakery beneath his building and bought bread. Gave half to the boy who still drew candlesticks with chalk on the sidewalk. You know what this is? The boy asked, pointing at his newest drawing. A pin bar, Dawood smiled. The boy nodded proudly. It tricks you, right? Dawood crouched beside him. Only if you forget to wait. That night, he packed. Not because he wanted to go, but because he had already decided long ago that trading wasn't just about charts. It was about evolution, about becoming someone new every time the market, or life, demanded it. He took the small stack of notebooks he had filled over the past year, left the cracked laptop for the next hungry mind that found his room, wrote one sentence on the back wall, in pen. You don't need money to start trading. You need pain, patience, and a reason not to quit. He left the key under the mat. walked into the night with a backpack, $312 in cash, and the login credentials to a $100,000 account waiting on the other side of a border. He didn't know where he would sleep tomorrow, didn't know what face would greet him at immigration, but he knew the numbers. He knew the market, and more than anything, he knew himself. He was no longer a refugee, no longer a soldier, no longer a victim. He was a trader, and the world, chaotic, beautiful, cruel, was now his chart. One candle at a time, one choice at a time, always moving forward. Thank you for listening to this episode of Forex Success Story. If Dawood's journey inspired you, even just a little, take a moment to reflect on your own. Where are you in your story? What is your next candle? If you found this episode valuable, like, comment, and subscribe to support more true, deeply human stories like this one. Your engagement helps us reach more aspiring traders around the world who need that spark to keep going. Until next time, stay sharp, stay steady, stay in the trade.